Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConaughey, broadcasting on our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter and on TikTok simultaneously. Welcome to everybody who's coming in across those platforms. Please do send in your comments, please do send in your greetings, please do tell us where you're coming from, and we will give you a shout out. Hello there to Ethan coming in on TikTok, and to Kyle as well. Thanks for your comments, broadcasting from the great British city of Glasgow. Tell us what great part of the United Kingdom you're broadcasting from, folks. Say hello to Debbie. Says, whoa, does it say that? Well, that was a big mistake. We can't always get it right, sorry about that, but we certainly start at 7 every Wednesday. Who said that? Debbie, is interesting. Is that the system? Because we would not have written that, but that's interesting to know. Thank you for telling us. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Debbie. It happens to be my birthday today. I was born several years ago, and this is the first time we've actually broadcast a program on my birthday, so that's a nice thing. Thank you for mentioning that, Debbie. Hello, Kat. Congratulations on our 10,000 TikTok followers. Absolutely, Kat. Well, thank you so much for that, because we went stratospheric basically on TikTok from Sunday until Tuesday. That 48-hour period, we took in almost 1,000 new followers on TikTok. Absolutely amazing stuff. We cannot be beaten. We just can't be beaten, as the song says. We just kept growing, and we're now at 10,500 followers and growing, I'm glad to say, Kat. And we're going to have to readjust our goals for next year. Our goal for the end of 2023 was 15,000 followers, but it looks the way that's going, that is a modest. There you go. That was atmospherics that in the atmosphere there that prevented us, that cut us off for 2 or 3 seconds. Debbie says the incorrect time was written on YouTube. Our apologies for that. We'll have to just check up. That must be a wee thing that we hadn't noticed. Thanks for that. Angie says hi from Dunfermline, and Harry Brown says happy birthday. Thank you, Harry. As does Roxborough Angus. Sue is from shivering Cornwall. Beautiful part of the country is Cornwall. And Stuart says good evening from Elgin, and good to see D Stanners in the house, says evening all. And Catherine says happy birthday. Thank you for your good wishes, Catherine. Adam saying he's been watching GB News earlier, and it's been said that the SNP are going to introduce an India F2 bill 1 month after the Supreme Court ruling. Also happy birthday, Alistair. Thank you, Adam. Yes, they want to try to introduce a bill somehow which will give them the power, which will allow Westminster to give them the power to hold another referendum. But of course that's not going to be happening. They may try it, but they're not going to manage that. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Imagine if you were to give any part of the United Kingdom the ability to break away on its own. What an absolute moral injustice to the rest of the United Kingdom. And we're going to be talking about that with our guest tonight at 7:30. We have LUCA from Amiable Arguments, and he's going to be on at 7:30. So please do stick around for our guest at 7:30, just after we've had our bottom of the hour competition as well, which will be for our fridge magnets. And you know how we love fridge magnets. Well, here's one of the United Kingdom. Check that out. That will look fantastic on any British fridge. Good stuff. And Animated Paul on TikTok wonders why Scotland should be allowed to have a say in breaking up the United Kingdom, but nobody else in the United Kingdom should have a say. Well, think about what I've just said there, Animated Paul. It's for that reason. You know, we live in a family here in the British Isles, and you can't just do what you want without the other people who are intimately involved having a say in it. And of course, we have our collective say through the mechanism of the British Parliament, which stands for all the people of all the United Kingdom. So that has to be the forum, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, just to clarify a few points on that as well. Stephen says it's almost cold enough to put a coat on. It is indeed. Well, we've put on our leather jacket here, our trusty leather jacket, which we've had since the 1980s, and I'm glad to say I can still fit in it, so that must be worth something. Hey Harvey, good man. And Paul says snow is falling all around us, children playing, having fun, and it's the season for love and understanding. Merry Christmas, everyone. Shakin' Stevens, one of my personal role models, as you can no doubt tell. Becky says happy birthday. I've seen Shakin' Stevens live, by the way, in Glasgow about 7 or 8 years ago. Brilliant chap. What's your favourite Christmas song? Okay, send in your favourite Christmas song and see if I know it, and I might even sing it for you. So, what do I need to say? Yes, the first thing that I need to say is to announce the winner of last week's giveaway. The winner of last week's giveaway. And I don't know if the chap is watching, but I'm just going to type in the person's name. And what we do with the giveaway is we had a cool bag, we had a tea towel for London, and we had a Union Jack bag, and it was given away to the person who we randomly chose, who had shared, commented and liked our broadcast, whether on any platform whatsoever. And the person who won is Nelson Norman. So if he's watching, please do contact us via email, tell us your address, and we will send your free giveaway to you. Now we have another giveaway this week, and basically you can enter it by simply commenting, as many of you have already commented, liking this broadcast, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, and sharing as well. You have to share. That's the critical bit. So if you can do those three things, we'll then check we'll check afterwards, and you don't have to do it while we're live. You can do it anytime in the next 6 days, and we will then announce the winner, randomly selected, next week. And this week the prize are these. They're not boxing gloves. They're not boxing gloves. They're oven gloves. Okay? You'll get those. You'll also get the trusty London tea towel. And you'll also get the trusty bag. Share, like and comment this post anytime between now and the next programme, and we'll choose a winner and we'll announce the winner next week, and the winner will be sent that gear, folks. Stuart says his favourite Christmas song is Stop the Cavalry by Jonah Louie. Stephen says Little Drummer Boy has always been his favourite. Becky says Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell Rock. And I don't know the other words to that. Happy birthday, hit the 40s. Not quite. That was a few years ago. Adam says he could do with some Union Jack boxing gloves to knock some sense into the Scott Nats. Harry loves them all. I heard a really good one recently. Leona Lewis, One More Sleep Until It's Christmas. I hadn't heard it before. It's just a kind of modern pop song, but I thought it was really, really catchy. That's been out actually for 3 or 4 years now. Christopher says, this bag is excellent. A walking advert for the most wonderful union in the world. Absolutely. TikTok folk, remember that. A walking advert for the most wonderful union in the world. Adam says Step Into Christmas by Sir Elton John. Paul's Stop the Cavalry by Jonah Louie is his favourite Christmas song, closely followed by Christmas Rapping by the Waitresses. Wow. That's one I've never heard of. But I'm definitely going to look that one up, as no doubt other people will. Folks, what's your opinion on the new SNP leader? Our man Flynn, Stephen Flynn. Stephen says the Scott Nats are doing our job for us. The discontent in the camp is hilarious. They can agree on nothing. Folks, remember we've got a guest coming up at 7:30. LUCA from Amiable Arguments podcast. Stephen says Flynn is a peril. Becky thinks he looks like a bit of a chav. Harry says he likes Don't Let the Bells End by The Darkness, and he finds that one catchy. Quite a few of their songs were quite catchy, weren't they? Yes, so I just want to have mention a few words about opinion polls, okay? Because it looks like what's happening is the Scottish Nationalists can't get their way via the British Parliament. So they've come up with a cunning ruse that what they're going to do is, if they can get sufficient number of opinion polls to show that, according to the opinion polls, a majority of people want separation, then they think somehow that's going to force the hand of the British government. Well, they've been encouraged in that particular point of view by some rather silly comments by people who should know better, whether MPs or commentators, putting out the point that if you can show that there's a settled will for separation, then and only then should you have another referendum. But here's the thing that we always say: there's no such thing in politics as a settled will. There's never a settled will. The will of the people changes every moment, and the will of the people is very fickle, and the will of the people depends upon who's got the power. In other words, who's got the megaphone and who's got the money to continue to push their particular messages into society. And that will change depending upon who's got the power. The will of the people is not some sort of perfect thing that can ever be judged, because it can always change, and it will always change due to circumstances and due to information which will change people's will from one position to another position, and that can change very, very quickly. So when anybody says we've got to wait until it's a settled will, through opinion polls themselves which can be exploited, then that's no way whatsoever to gauge the opinion. And I'm going to tell you how you probably would gauge the best way that you can gauge opinion in a moment. But for a moment, think about the absurdity of relying upon opinion polls in order to justify a second referendum. Okay, opinion polls are used often deliberately to lead opinion as much as to reflect opinion. And don't imagine that you can't get people to believe absolutely crazy nonsense, because you definitely can. And I've said this before, you could start opinion polling people on the street and say Nicola Sturgeon's going to bring in a new law that we've all got to walk backwards down the street. What do you think of that? And you'd find that probably initially most people would think that was a bad idea. But there might be, 1% of people who believe that it's actually quite a good idea for whatever particular strange reason. And so the polls the next day would go, 99% of the people in Scotland are opposed to people who walk backwards down the street. Are they bigoted in that view? And people would start to think, oh, hang on, walking down the street backwards is maybe the thing to do these days. And if you oppose that, or if you sit at a dinner party and you say, these people who walk down the street backwards, they're absolute idiots, then boom, you're the bad person. Okay, so they would push the idea that you can't criticize people who walk backwards down the street. And then a few months later, once they've suitably shamed everybody who's against people who walk backwards down the street, what they would then do is they'd have another opinion poll, and lo and behold, they would find that maybe 10-15% of people were now thinking, you know what, walking backwards down the street's a great idea. I don't know why I didn't do this before now. And literally, then they'd start a plot line into EastEnders and Coronation Street. And that one, the Scottish one, what was the Scottish soap that they had? I can't recall. But it would be like, here's Davy, and his special power is walking backwards down the street. Isn't he such a cool guy? Don't we all love him for that? And people would go, that's just brilliant, walking backwards down the street. I'm going to start doing that. And then, of course, people would start knocking into each other. But if you knocked into somebody who was walking backwards down the street, then you'd be the bad guy. So people would be, everybody's walking backwards down the street now because that's the way to do it. And they take a new opinion poll, and lo and behold, 18 months have gone by and everybody thinks it's a good idea to walk backwards down the street. That's how you do it. You move people slowly in literally the direction that you want to move them. And people can be moved in any direction with sufficient power and money, unfortunately. So, and I'm not being cynical here, I'm just actually explaining how it works. Opinion polls will lead opinion, not necessarily reflect opinion. And of course, I'm exaggerating to a certain effect there, but you know what I mean. So you should never trust opinion polls. It's a black art, And opinion polls are often deliberately constructed as well by people who have got a vested interest in leading opinion in a particular way. And they're also set up in order to create talking points for the media also, so the media can start talking about particular issues that maybe hitherto had been a little bit risky or a little bit crazy. An opinion poll can be brought out around that particular matter. And again, you cannot, going back to what I said earlier, you can't rely upon that because they're a snapshot in time. People's opinions change as a consequence of changed circumstances and changed information. And so they're not, an opinion poll is not a reflection of a permanent position. But the media will try to pretend that it is. So we cannot have opinion polls being the means by which we decide how on earth we're going to have a second referendum. And I just want to bring up somebody, a picture here of a chap who made a comment about opinion polls, and this guy is the media call him a constitutional expert, but if he is, then we are all in trouble, because he was saying Let's just get his tweet up here. He was saying that there at the bottom, if polls show clear and constant majority support for IndyRef 2, so be it. Get to 60% support for 6 to 9 or 12 months and that's settled will. And in those circumstances, the UK state will not block what Scotland wants. That's absolutely horrifying. That's a horrifying thing to say. We simply cannot have the future of our country based upon opinion polls which themselves are run by people with vested interests. Okay. So, how do you do it? How would you get a sufficient mandate? Okay, how would you get a sufficient mandate? The way you would get a sufficient mandate would be for the Scottish National Party and its supporters to stand at a British parliamentary election on an abstentionist basis. Okay, vote for us and we will not go to Westminster and will not take up our seats. Now, in saying that, I'm not giving away any secret information or whatever. That's always been known that that's the way that you demand change, and that's the way that Sinn Féin popularised. And much as I don't like that particular party, they're certainly constitutionally correct as far as that goes. So if the Scottish National Party ever got a majority, and it would have to be a majority of the entire Scottish electorate, voting for abstentionist candidates, then and only then could you say that there was sufficient mandate in the country to hold a second referendum. And that's something that they may never get. Good. I don't want them to get it. But that's the correct constitutional position, and that's how they would be able to demonstrate sufficient people in Scotland being completely alienated from the rest of the UK. And the good thing about abstentionism is it does force people to think about that. It does force them to think, am I so completely alienated from my brothers and sisters throughout the United Kingdom that I want nothing to do with them in the British Parliament? And if they are so completely alienated in that sense, and if a majority of the Scottish electorate was so alienated and indicated that through abstentionism to the British Parliament, then and only then could you say, yeah, there seems to be sufficient will here to destroy the United Kingdom. Okay, because that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. So the bar has to be set high, and it has to be set serious. And anybody who thinks that 6 months polling showing a consistent 60%, anybody who thinks that and produces that as the way to have a second referendum is a bloomin' idiot. A bloomin' idiot who shouldn't be anywhere near a pen and paper. So I got that there off my chest. Now I see that our guest is in the waiting room. Looking forward to speaking to LUCA in 5 or 6 minutes. Just before we speak to LUCA, I want to talk about this day in British history. Fra says it's called choice. It absolutely is. It's called choice. We live in a democracy. So on this day in British history matters. Now on this day in British history, a child was born who would go on to have a programme on the internet called Good Evening Britain. So that was me. But for those of you who are interested in where I was born, I've got a picture here of where I was born. And I was born there, believe it or not, at the top of Mount Kellet in Hong Kong in the British Military Hospital in Hong Kong. That's my birthplace. Fantastic. Okay, but getting to other issues, on this day in British history, the world's 4th ever underground was opened, which was to say Glasgow Underground, on this day, 14th of December 1896, it was the fourth oldest underground rail transport system in Europe, after London, which was the first, Liverpool's Mersey Railway, and the Budapest Metro. And the Glasgow Underground came along very quickly thereafter. And what I really like about the Underground is I always use this as a story, right? They built the Glasgow Underground without any help from an MSP, without any help from Scotland's Transport Minister to get everything wrong. And in the light of our present constitutional obsession, that seems incredibly remarkable. But all it took for anything to get built prior to 1999, when we had the Scottish Parliament, was simply for an act of the British Parliament to say, let it be done. Let it be done. And it was called, quote, the Glasgow District Subway Act, for making subways in the city and suburbs of Glasgow and for other purposes, 1890. That was passed by the British Parliament, by Queen Victoria. And lo and behold, 6 years later, we had a fantastic functioning underground, which we're still riding on to this day. Like every other single major infrastructural programme in Scotland prior to 1999, all it took was an act of the British Parliament and the Secretary of State for Scotland saying, let it be done, and the blokes on the ground just organised and did it. And you did not need a Holyrood Parliament to get in the way, to get it wrong, to get to make it run over cost, and so on. I mean, seriously, could you imagine the SNP building an underground today? Okay, I mean, they can't even build a bridge, and that's overground. So can you imagine them trying to do it underground? No, I personally can't. I can't imagine it, okay? Because it would just go through so many quangos, and Nicola Sturgeon would be trying to figure out, how do we get the maximum gain here for independence? Okay, how can we build this underground in such a way that it will actually benefit our independence malarkey? You know, and in that, she would foul up in some way. So, and then the Nats will come on and they'll go, oh, what's the union ever done for us? Well, here in Glasgow, as well as building the actual city, you know, it's built the underground there. How about that? Oh, no, apart from that. So, we've got a couple of photographs here of the rather stern, I guess that must be the opening ceremony, with these gentlemen. They're the ones who built it, basically. So the Secretary of State tells them, those guys in the top hats and bowler hats, get your workers and start digging a big hole and get it done. And they just organised among themselves, and within 6 years, boom, we have it. We have the underground. And we've another picture here of the St Enoch underground. Now that's in 1977. They were doing some renovations on that. I think that's a great photograph. There just seems to be so much going on in there. But who knew that under that underground ticket office, that's what it looks like? Because that office is still there. That office is still there today, which looks like something from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But beautiful little structure that. And that's what it's sitting on. It doesn't seem to be sitting on very much. Crikey. St Enoch. Okay. Cool. So I'll ask you a question about that in a moment. Let's see what the comments are like. Yeah, Alan says, look at the tram fiasco. Yeah, trams, they're above ground. That's a better analogy that I was using there. They can't get the trams right, and the trams run above the ground. Imagine them trying to build it below the ground. Well, Adam says something that other people say, yeah, the underground's just a circle, and in that sense, it's fairly boring. Can we like branch off and extend it to other Glaswegian suburbs? Well, I'm not sure that we can under the present government. or the present administration, I think that would probably, they start digging the tunnel in the wrong direction and like end up in the North Sea and flood us all or something like that. You just know it wouldn't be right. Unfortunately, I wasn't in that pic. Maybe my mum and dad were. Paul says if they built an underground, they'd call it the Sturgeon Line and name the stations after SNP cronies. They totally would. They totally would. Yeah. We're just approaching the John Swinney terminus. And next stop is Mary. Absolutely. British Soldier says, I have a chance to speak to an SNP person in a few days. What should I say? Why do you want to break up my country? Why do you want to destroy the greatest union we've ever known? Put them on the spot. Hey, Anthony, good evening to you. Now, we've got our man LUCA, folks. LUCA is in the waiting room. I'm just going to bring on LUCA and we are going to have a good discussion for the next 20 minutes. Now, LUCA mentioned yesterday in his, when he was advertising it on Twitter, he said that he was going to be guesting with us. And he says, the case for the union must be made with depth and conviction, and we will make it, indeed. So, say hello to LUCA. Hi there, LUCA.
Hello there. Hello, good evening to you, Alistair. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for being on, LUCA, and it's good to see you. You're coming through loud and clear.
Good.
Now, I was wondering, maybe just for the first couple of minutes, please, could you just introduce yourself to the viewers, explaining in particular the background of how you came to be on the show today, in the sense of what was it that, how did you find a force for good? What motivated you to look for a force for good and to support the union in the way that you do? Just some background info on what you're about there, please.
Sure, of course. Well, I suppose to begin with, I ought to begin by saying that I discovered the Force for Good actually through your Instagram page. And what was so fascinating about just happening upon a Force for Good was that it was actually kind of the first time that I'd seen a large, sort of focused resistance to what was actually going on in Scotland, and certainly the Scottish opinion that was always put across as simply the ubiquitous opinion that was happening across Scotland, that independence was inevitable and that ultimately there was no real British patriotism there. They were just a dying breed. But and so actually happening upon your Instagram, which just came through in my feed, was just such a breath of fresh air to see you interacting with so many people on the streets of Glasgow, to see all of these events and crowdfunders. It was incredibly exciting. It truly was. And then I suppose as regards to myself, I started the podcast about I've slept, about a year and a half ago now, I think it was, called Amiable Arguments. And to begin with, it was genuinely a knee-jerk reaction, because every single day I would see aspects of cancel culture just sort of infecting through society, and I would see people losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, having their reputations smeared, and it was always based upon, not always, but certainly the vast majority, always based around people having the least charitable takes of other people's opinions. And they think that because they've heard two sentences that's been put into the newspapers, or this particular BBC station, news station has put it out there, then this is public enemy number one. We've found this from 10 years ago or yesterday or whenever, and this person just, they're no good. They're no good. They've got to go. And I just don't think that's very productive for a healthy society, really. I think that, they say that charity begins at home. Well, why don't we have some charity in the country amongst our country folk? That would be, I think, a really strong position to start off from. And so Amiable Arguments really started out from my housemate at the time basically saying to me, why don't you just make a podcast, get something out there? And I said, no, I'm not brave enough. And then literally it took me 24 hours to go, all right, fine, I'll do it because I'm just so mad. And then so from there it just sort of filtered. But I really wanted to make a point that my podcast wasn't about getting the big names on. Anyone can look to see what a politician has to say, or a journalist, or God forbid, a celebrity, and what their opinion is on the way that things are currently going. And I really wanted to create a podcast that was dedicated to just the views of the ordinary, everyday citizen. I really wanted it to be, because we see, to go back to your point, I was listening in before I came on to what you were saying about polls. Well, we see polls all the time, and very rarely do I find they actually have any reflection of what I hear going on the streets. And I never get asked, to do these polls. I wish they would, that they could do with a boost in the numbers. But yes, so ultimately it's just a matter of wanting to create a public forum, not to say I'm Elon Musk or anything, but to create a public forum for ordinary, everyday people to voice whatever they want to talk about. And that's led Amiable Arguments to have. We have episodes on Voltaire, we have episodes on immigration, we have episodes on wokeness, we have episodes on religion, we have anything that my guest wants to bring to the table, that's what we'll talk about.
Excellent. Good. Well, I was on a program with you at the start of the year. I think it was several months ago anyway, I think around about the spring. And we'll put the link to that. You'll find that up in the comment thread. And I certainly enjoyed that. And I was very much taken by your enthusiasm about the union, which I'll speak about in a moment. But I've just remembered that I forgot to ask the question. Stephen Beer has just reminded me that I had to ask the question for our fridge magnet, and the question is, on this day, the 4th ever underground in the world was opened. In which great British city was that underground? And send your answer in, please, to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Good. Well, yes, you. What is it that sparked your interest, do you think, in the union in particular? I mean, obviously you have, because there's lots of people throughout the United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, Wales. They don't necessarily think about the union. It's just like it's a sort of given. It's just there. And many people perhaps don't really understand the extent to which it is under threat, so, but you see that and you're concerned about that. And so that marks you, along with our viewers, as unusual in that regard, because you've got a desire to maintain it. Would you like to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, sure. I suppose on a personal level, I've always had an inherent patriotism, and I've sort of tried to figure out where that comes from, and that's not an answer I'm going to be able to give you today. However, I do believe that it's very important to understand that these things that we inherit don't just drop out of thin air. Invariably, they are gifts, as it were, from the people who inhabited these isles before us, who are every bit as much our countrymen as those who are still now amongst us and living. And they, in the same way that we get up every day and go out to work and want to make the world a better place for those after us, those before us did exactly the same thing. And I think that the Union was certainly during the 1707 Act of Union between England and Scotland, it was deeply advantageous to Scotland to join England, but also obviously England was only happy to take the offer as well, because there were certain benefits for England to get from having Scotland as an ally and no longer a possible threat on the border, sort of England wedged between Scotland and France, which had been something that had been quite prevalent over the 200 years prior to the 1700s. And so it really is just a question of what can Britain give? What can the identity of what it means to be British give to the people of Scotland and to the people of England? And this is where I think that, not to sound too controversial, however, I think that truly the greatness of Scotland is the fact that it has always been an underdog. It's always been economically inferior to England. It's always been agriculturally inferior to England. It's always been militarily inferior to England. And that's not Scotland's fault. Even now, it's a population with about, 1/8 the population, and it's enormously mountainous. These are just the natural hands that Scotland was dealt. But it's Scotland's ability to overcome these obstacles and always be such an important part of the English story, in the same way that England has always been such an important part of the Scottish story, that I think actually makes the union of England and Scotland one of the great sort of experiments, as it were, in history. It's not a small thing to get two countries that have had a somewhat uniquely hostile history with one another to suddenly create one of the most formidable, brilliant, and entrepreneurial partnerships that the world has ever seen.
Incredible. Well said. Well said. And that's a very interesting argument that I've really never heard before. And I've heard a lot of them, and it's not an argument; it's just a fact, a point of view, a way of explaining the union in a sense that people can understand, and that the greatness of Scotland is that it's not equal to England, that they're so different, yet they came together with their differences at the time and form something much, much, much greater. And I think it's important also, as you mentioned there, that Scotland and England, when they came together, and to this day, were not equal in any in like sort of a population sense. We're not equal in the sense of having the same number of MPs at Westminster. We're not equal in having the same military power or economic power. I mean, we're equal in the moral sense of, we're all the same in that sort of way. But politically, there is a disparity in power, and it's absurd to pretend that there's not. But within the union, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That disparity only becomes a thing when you actually break away. And Scottish nationalists don't seem to realise that at the moment. If you do break away, you're literally going to be sleeping in bed with an elephant. And the point is that when we actually joined together, that didn't matter. We became the danger of that didn't affect us. But when you break away and you actually see the military, the economic, the agricultural disparities and differences, then these could become a problem in time, just as they were a problem in the past, which thankfully got resolved by the union.
Absolutely.
That has to be emphasised. That has to be emphasised. I mean, the Scottish nationalists like to talk about, we're equal partners. Well, it's not really. We're not. We're all together at the moment. We're all together, and we're all treated equally. But if you break us away, then you're going to find that we're very much unequal, unfortunately. And what's that going to mean politically going forward. I don't think it's going to make things better. I can't see how it's possibly going to make things better when you start emphasising the disparity.
No, this is an important point. And also onto that point is the SNP saying about equal partners and everything. It's very difficult, to be an equal partner when you're constantly asking your partner why they're grabbing the kitchen knife for the 75th time in a menacing sort of position and trying to basically hack one of the limbs off of the body that makes up the United Kingdom. We are essentially right now, because of the SNP, a political union that is fighting on the world stage with one hand tied behind its back, because to the point of the SNP, there isn't a single thing that can be done in Scotland, whether it be something like putting up some roadworks, making sure that the buses run on time, building a bridge, as you said before I came on, or passing a piece of legislation. Everything has to be viewed through the prism of independence. There is always this overhanging motive behind everything. It can't just be done for the good of Scotland and for the good of anyone who comes there. It always has to be done for, look how good we could be just if we could get rid of our English overlords. And I would like to press on this point, because there is an old George Orwell quote in which he discusses the socialism. And Orwell says of the socialists quite famously that the socialists don't love the poor, they hate the rich. And the thing about the SNP is that they don't love Scotland, they hate England. And I think this is such an important point, and I think it is the evidence for what I say lies in the fact that there is nothing culturally conservative within the SNP's politics. Every Scottish hero is up for debate. David Hume can have his reputation smeared through the dirt. David Livingstone's got to go. Adam Smith, who is, marked as the father of capitalism, is also just to be thrown aside. And these aren't just great Scottish thinkers; these are great British thinkers who work together with a union to give something great to the world. And the SNP don't want anything to do with them because they were never made famous for hacking an Englishman's head off on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's right. Well, absolutely. And you find that, you talked about the woke thing earlier, you find that especially with the SNP, is they don't want to know really about the great Scottish people of what we like to call the Age of Achievement, which was the 1800s and 1900s. And,
there was an entire period called the Scottish Enlightenment, which is quite marvellous.
There was also that as well. And the reason they don't want to concentrate on that period of Scottish history too much is that so much of the great things that happened and that the Scots were able to achieve on the world stage was a direct consequence of the Union and of hitching a ride with everybody else here on the British Isles and enjoying the benefits of association which accrue when you do that. And so it makes too much of a case for the Union when they concentrate on the achievements of certain notable Scots throughout history. And so they have a rather standoffish attitude to many of them, but they're quite happy going away back into the 1200s and 1300s, which is so far back now that they can get away with it. From your position where you are, which is in England, I mean, in terms of Unionist visibility, when you're watching the television or anything like that, do you think many people are aware that there's groups like ourselves doing what we can up here? Do you think people in England or London or wherever are aware of that, or do you think they're just really kind of we're invisible to them?
No, No, I think that the visibility issue is certainly a problem. And if I were to criticise the English for a second, which I have no problem doing, having a bit of self-criticism, I do think that generally speaking on the subject of independence, the English at this moment have a really irritating aloofness about the entire thing. And then to be honest, it's a legitimate criticism from the Scots that there is an aloofness to the English in regards to Scotland that certainly needs to be remedied. But I think a part of this would be healed if it were that we had better MPs in Parliament actually making the case for the Union. I was referred yesterday to a speech by Penny Mordaunt that she did recently, in which she basically says, well, if the SNP are looking for all this money, here's all this money we gave you. And then she just sort of did a little checklist off of all of the things that the SNP had basically thrown money away on stuff that wasn't really of any particular importance. But the thing is, it's not a good enough argument. Because if the only thing that can be pinned on the SNP is, I don't know, throwing away uselessly public money on, bad services and everything, well, the Tories don't have much of a leg to stand on, do they? So let's not go there talking about all of that. But in particular, Ian Blackford has been in the Parliament for about 5 years now, and you can always see him. He's just gone, of course, but he was always the third or fourth person to stand up whenever Prime Minister's question was on, and it would always be a case for independence. And whether it was Boris or May or Liz or whichever one we're on now, it was always just a case of, you've had your referendum and tough, basically. And that's not really good enough. You need to be arguing, you need to put forward the positive vision for why the union exists and the reason why it should continue to exist.
Yes.
And,
yes, sorry, I agree. I think that I know the Penny Mordaunt one that you mean. We put that up on our TikTok, and it got almost, wait for this, almost 500,000 views. In fact, it's probably 500,000 now. So it went down a storm, and she was absolutely great about it. And she did summarise very well, like, stop complaining about waste of money when you're just as bad at it. And so that was good. But as you say, we have a dearth of visible people at that political level who can really stand up and make a passionate appeal to Great Britain, to the Union, to the importance of it, and so on. And I feel that even though Penny Mordaunt is great at what she does, she needs to, and she and others, to the extent that they're able to do it, need to have much more passion of the heart there. And we'll all rally behind them if they can do it. But I think that's what we're lacking. And I think that's why the Scottish National Party tend to be dominant in this particular debate is, well, firstly, if we put aside the fact that the media have them on all the time, and the media literally don't even want to talk to folk like ourselves, then putting that aside, when you look at who is out there as a prominent PM or MP rather, who can really make a great case for the union and can stand up for it just on those grounds, just on the grounds of the heart, not just the head, then we're kind of struggling at the moment. And so much politics just does come down to personalities, and if you've got good personalities who can make a good case for it, then that can really help to shift the opinion polls as well. Because these opinion polls recently, if you believe them, which I'm not inclined to because of, as I mentioned earlier, who's funding them, what are the questions, so on and so forth, they're based upon the fact that there's very few effective pro-UK speakers making the case in the first place. And so if the case goes by the way, then obviously the case for the union's not being heard. So it's our job by which I mean all us pro-UK folk, to find and to raise up these intelligent voices from wherever they may be in the Union, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales, or even from outside in the Commonwealth, who can make the case for the motherland, as it were, which is to say the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that's what's so refreshing about yourself as well, as a young person from England who's very much awake to these issues and to the importance of making the case, and you're able to make it in a new and refreshing way. So we're so glad to have had you on. Now, it's just coming to the end of our interview here. I want to thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention in the remaining couple of minutes?
Yes, if I could just press a little further, I'd just like to, because I don't think I've made a good argument, I've made an argument for why the union has existed and what a success it has been, but I would like to make an argument for why it should continue to exist. Mm-hmm. And that is the fact that, and Ireland, Northern Ireland and Wales are very important in this too, that after 1801, with the Act of Union there, in which Ireland and Wales and we became not Great Britain, but the United Kingdom. Being the United Kingdom is what makes us a serious voice on the world stage. England would not be as serious a voice on the world stage if it were just England, in the same way that Scotland wouldn't be. It's us being together as one. And I still think to this day, there is more that we share than what divides us as four nations. Obviously, that there is work to do, and I would like to see a serious government in Westminster at some point in the near future. It would be the first that I've had in my own lifetime as well. I know that the people of Scotland, certainly on the pro-independence argument, get very frustrated about the fact that they never feel represented by Westminster. Well, I can assure you that I, as an Englishman, don't feel very represented by them either. But we make the do with the best that we can. And I think if you're looking for salvation in the SNP, you're going down the rocky slope, because the SNP, when they're forced to choose between freedom and authority, they will always choose the boot.
Yes. When the SNP have to choose between freedom and authority, they'll always choose the boot, as George Orwell would have summarised it, no doubt. Well, yes. Thank you for that. That's a good way to end it. People have been enjoying your comments tonight. Catherine says very interesting. LUCA, thank you. Alan says excellent guest. Hope to see you back.
Oh well, it's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we definitely will. We definitely will have you back. Becky says thank you, LUCA. That was excellent.
Oh.
Good stuff.
Glad to be speaking to you all. It's a great pleasure.
Yes. Slim says thanks, LUCA. Paul just says, if the motherland disintegrated, how would Gibraltarians and Falklanders who are loyal to this country feel? That's another angle which you alluded to there when you said England would be much diminished on the world stage if the Union were to collapse, as would all these other countries. I mean, the Falklands is not going to last for very long as British territory. I can't imagine.
No, not if Argentina win the World Cup. No, for sure. They get cocky if they do that.
That's true. That's true. Christopher says very good analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Harry definitely agrees about MPs in England being complacent about the Union. Absolutely. Ron says, God bless you all and Merry Christmas.
Absolutely. I stuck on my Yule Britannia sort of jumper to be to work with you on that one, because it's just such a nice little slogan you've got there.
Exactly. Yule Britannia. We love it. Stephen says, what an interesting guest. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
LUCA, you're at Amiable Arguments, which can be found on YouTube and also on Instagram.com/amiable_arguments. And that's how you found us. Well, it's good to know that we found you on Instagram, because we've got a very good site on Instagram and a great curator who posts daily on that as well. So, LUCA, let's stay in touch. We need young fellows like yourself with the wisdom and insight that you've got. So please, let's put our brains together and make things happen going forward into 2023. Have a lovely Christmas.
Thank you. You too. Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you, Alistair.
Right. Good night.
Good night.
Fantastic. Well, LUCA really is something else as far as awareness of these matters is concerned. So thank you very much for coming on, and we really do have good guests here, don't we? Well, we have a winner for our competition, which is this little magnet of Britain with Northern Ireland there as well. And we asked, on this day, 14th of December 1896, the world's fourth underground station was built. In which great British city was it? And of course it was in Glasgow. And the winner is Lisa Finn. Wonderful, Lisa. We will get this in the post to you tomorrow. We're also going to stick in a wee keyring for you, and we'll also put our latest issue of Busting Indie Myths in the post to you tomorrow. Please could you send your address to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Use that same email. Send us your address and we will get that in the post to you. And also, folks, remember our giveaway this week. Our giveaway for our Union Jack oven gloves, our tea towel, and our Union Jack bag. And all you need to do is to like and share this post, or retweet this post, please, and we will pick a random winner and we'll announce the winner next week. And you can share or retweet anytime in the next 6 days. The sooner the better, ideally. Now, we've also, of course, got our crowdfunder, and we haven't been mentioning the crowdfunder tonight, have we? But we definitely need to get that crowdfunder highlighted, because the crowdfunder is when we bring in the most money, which enables us to get through the next year. It brings in the bulk of the money for our activism in 2023. So please go to crowdfunder.co.uk/AFFG 2023, and you can just click the orange support us and just drop in whatever you can, or click where it says rewards. If you're watching on a mobile phone, if you click rewards, and that will take you to various rewards that we have, which for a particular donation you can get a specific reward, including things like this. Including things like that. Check that out, eh? That's our Union Jack shield. There's only 2 of them on offer, but that's one of the rewards that you can get on our crowdfunder. Good. Anything else that I need to say today? Thank you to all the comments. It is a cracker, isn't it? An absolute cracker. Stephen says, what's your Christmas schedule? We will be back on the 21st, which is to say next Wednesday. And then we'll be taking a week off. And then we'll be back on the 4th, Wednesday the 4th, which will be the final day of our crowdfunder. So, and we'll have a guest next week as well. We really do enjoy having the guests on. Really do enjoy having the guests on, and if you're watching and you'd like to be a guest, drop us a line and we may well be able to have you on. And we'll be thinking about next year as well, and whether we'll maybe change things around a little bit or whatever. That's still to be decided, but we'll certainly be back with this edition of Good Evening Britain next Wednesday, and then we'll take a week off, and then it'll be the 4th when we'll have one. Alan says, excellent show. Hope you all have a good evening. Go and enjoy your birthday, Alistair. Well, I definitely will. Thanks very much. Okay, folks. Thank you also to everybody on TikTok. Chap says there, Shaken Stevens can't handle his iron brew. Well, we'll see about that. Hopefully I will. Some comments that I won't read out on TikTok, but they're all very complimentary. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, we'll see you next week. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.